What's going on, YouTube? So today I am back with my top 25 rankings for week 5. So I just got done with my week 5 predictions. I think that was maybe 30 minutes or an hour ago. So go ahead and start with my 5 outside. So big shakeup in the bottom of the rankings this week, like right around the I'd say like 18 to 25 area. A lot of these teams that, you know, inside and outside the top 25, kind of shocking to see them here this early in the season. So start with number 5, I got Kansas State, 4 Memphis, 3 Toledo, 2 Oregon, and then 1 Florida. So Oregon got bounced from the top 25 completely, at least in the AP poll. They were, I think, tied for 25. Excuse me, in the coaches poll, which I don't know if I 100% agree with, because I'll be honest, I'd still take Oregon over Michigan or Cal or even Mississippi State. You start moving up the rankings a little bit. I don't know if I'd take them over like West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Stanford, Wisconsin, that area. But obviously they lose by 42 to the number 18 ranked team in the country. Just by logic standards, you have to go ahead and bounce them out. They're a 2-loss team at week 5 that just lost by 42. So I understand where the logic comes from. Their defense is horrid. Their offense just doesn't really have that much consistency under them. I think they can be very talented offense. They just got to figure out the whole quarterback situation. Utah looked very good against them yesterday, though. I'm not taking any credit away from Utah. But yeah, Florida, big win against Tennessee. I think that was more against Tennessee than it was for Florida, just because Tennessee just can't seem to close out games anymore. Well, I can't say anymore, but last 10 years it's been crazy. Anyway, Kansas State had a bye. Toledo, undefeated, kind of surprising there, but they honestly look like a decent team this year. And Memphis had a 53-46 win over Cincinnati. I believe that was on Thursday. Controversial hit on Gunnar Kiel in that game, but that might be for another video. So move on to the top 25. At 25, we got Texas Tech. So Texas Tech's a lot better than a lot of people anticipated. Defense is still not, or I think their defense is still as bad as ever. Maybe a little bit better than last year. I mean, it's hard for them to be worse than last year, giving up 82 points to TCU in one game. But as a whole, Texas Tech, their offense has massively improved. DeAndre Washington's good. I think he's starting to finally get a little bit of credit at running back. Jakeem Grant's starting to get a little bit more credit at wide receiver too. And obviously Patrick Mahomes is the biggest difference for that offense. Now, they do gain quite a bit of credibility this week, even though they did lose. But it was a 3-point loss to a decent TCU team. Now, if TCU had all their defensive starters there, obviously it probably would have been vastly different. But, it's just a big game of what-ifs. So, for me, Texas Tech is good enough to be in the top 25 right now. Move on to 24, I've got Michigan. So, Michigan had a big week against BYU, winning 31-0. I didn't see that coming at all. I thought BYU would be able to handle it. Michigan's looked very good since the Utah game, and obviously that 7-point loss to Utah in the opening game is looking pretty good right now. So move on to 23, I've got California. So Cal stays undefeated. Really haven't had much of a test yet. I think their biggest test was really against Texas, and Texas just wasn't able to close out that game. But you can trust the leadership with Cal just because of Jared Goff. I think he is the best quarterback in the country right now. It's hard to... maybe not the best overall statistically, but just best NFL prospect at least. It's hard to come up with someone who's been more valuable to their team, maybe outside of Leonard Fournette. So I think Jared Goff, if Cal continues the way they're going, could definitely be a solid Heisman contender. Move on to 22. I've got Mississippi State. So Mississippi State had I think a closer win than a lot of people were in. Well, I don't know. Mississippi State, I don't even know if they were favored last week, but I do think that Mississippi State probably should have won by a little bit more, but I think Auburn's defense is starting to put it together a little bit. I think Auburn might be headed in the right direction. It's hard for them to be headed more in the wrong direction, but if they can finally get that quarterback situation figured out and they start playing a little bit better, then that win's going to look a little bit better for Mississippi State. Anyhow, Mississippi State's only loss right now is to a pretty good LSU team that they only lost by 2. So I believe they're deserving of the 22 spot. At 21, I've got West Virginia. So they had a huge win against Maryland last week. West Virginia has improved. hasn't proved any reason for them not to be in the top 25. The defense looks real solid, considering how much the offense lost. They've been playing solid as well. Skylar Howard looks good. Javon Durant looks good as well. So, yeah, I think West Virginia is definitely a top 5 contender in the Big 12, no doubt. They got a big game coming up against Oklahoma this weekend, though. So, number 20, I've got Oklahoma State. So, Oklahoma State, maybe a little bit of a lucky win this weekend against Texas. Texas had another special teams mishap on Saturday. So, if you guys saw it, punt with about, I think it was a little bit less than a minute to go. Punter, good snap, just went right through his hands, hit him in the face, and then he kicked it out of bounds for maybe a 10-yard punt, if that. So set Oklahoma State right up in field goal position, and OSU was able to nail a 40-yarder to win the game. Now, OSU looked like they were going to take control of the game early. Then Mason Rudolph had a fumble where it just dropped out of his hands in the second quarter, and looked like his confidence was pretty much shaking completely after that. OSU couldn't move the ball anymore. They couldn't throw it. I don't think Gundy trusted either quarterback to throw the ball. The running game went stagnant just because they ran the same play almost every time. But anyhow, the defense looked incredibly solid, even though it was 27 points given up by the team. I believe there was more points given up by the offense than there was by the defense. So defense played real solid against a Gerard Hurd quarterback that had a ton of hype going to the weekend. Definitely a good quarterback, at least scrambling. And for the most part, they were able to shut him down, kept him under 200 yards total, I believe under 100 yards for passing and rushing. So, yeah, big for Oklahoma State to come away with that win and get a solid start in Big 12 play. So move on to number 19, Wisconsin. Really just, 3 straight wins for them. I don't know, 2 or 3 straight wins since the Alabama game. They've been looking pretty solid, but they do have a big game against Iowa this weekend that'll really show a lot about Wisconsin. Aside from Alabama, this is really their first true tough test. If they can come away with a win against a actually really vastly improved Iowa team, I think that's a huge springboard for Wisconsin into Big Ten play to kind of prove that they are that third best team in the Big Ten right now. Now, with the emergence of Michigan, the emergence of Iowa, it's a little bit of a battle right now for that third slot. I think that Northwestern's definitely a good team. Right now, I think the third best team. But Wisconsin and Northwestern rank pretty close together. I think if Wisconsin come through with a big win, maybe if Northwestern loses this weekend, even if Wisconsin comes away with a more impressive win than Northwestern, then I think that'll help them out a lot in getting some of their credibility back to getting maybe back inside the top 15 for the top 25 rankings. So move on to number 18, I've got Stanford. So Stanford looks like they've gotten on the right track since the Northwestern game. Big win against USC 2 weeks ago, and then last weekend a good win against Oregon State. Nothing huge, but able to beat the spread, able to stay. I'd say stayed off a little bit of an upset alert. Some people had Oregon State in that game just because they thought it was a little bit of a track game for Stanford between 2 big games against USC and Arizona. They thought they might overlook Oregon State a little bit, but it was none of the such. And Stanford heads into this following weekend against a very banged up Arizona team, an Arizona team that doesn't look too good, and should be able to come away with another win. And they do look like they're the front runners in the Pac-12 North right now. So move on to number 17, Northwestern. So they do head into a big game with Minnesota undefeated. Now, I think the big thing for Northwestern is kind of proving this continuity that they can be good for an entire year, that they are the third best team in the Big Ten, maybe even better. Who knows? They haven't played Michigan State, Ohio State, any team like that yet. So they definitely could be a contender inside the Big Ten. They haven't lost yet. They've beaten some good teams. They beat Duke, which that win looks pretty good now since the Duke win against Georgia Tech, and that win against Stanford is also looking pretty good. So Northwestern they got 2 big wins, 2 incredibly huge out-of-conference wins, as big as anyone else in the Big Ten, I think, considering how good their wins are looking right now. But yeah, I think they're very deserving of a top 20 spot. They can get a win against Minnesota this weekend, then I think that'll definitely vault them into the top 15 and maybe even Big Ten title talk. Move on to number 16. I've got USC. So I do have a decent amount of faith in USC from watching them play almost every week. They just look good. Juju Smith is, I think, almost impossible to stop. Just incredibly fast. Cody Kessler looked a little bit off at the beginning of the game. I think the big thing is the defense played better. big game against Arizona State, a game that I think a lot of people thought that USC might lose. Arizona State might get back on track, but it was none of the sorts. USC had a big win. I think that that's proving they're still a contender in the Pac-12. A lot of people had them written off after the loss to Stanford. For the time being, they're out of playoff contention pretty much completely. But if they can put, I guess I'd say if they can put an undefeated regular season together for the rest of the season, then they'll at least be back in the talk for the college football playoff. They'll be on the outside looking in definitely, but if the top end team starts kind of chewing each other out, then you never know. Move on to number 15. I've got Oklahoma, so they had a bye week. They're heading into a big game this weekend against West Virginia. I think this is a big game for both teams, for both OU and West Virginia, because both of them have looked very good in non-conference play. Both of them have vaulted up in the rankings a lot since, I wouldn't say a lot, OU's jumped a couple spots, but especially West Virginia. Both teams look like they're pretty legit, and I think this is a big game if it's a close game, both teams look good, then I think they both stay in Big 12 title contention and stay relevant in the national picture, but I think this is a big opportunity for both teams to prove they're for real. So move on to number 14. I've got Texas A&M. They had a pretty close win against Arkansas, a lot closer than they probably would have liked to have done, but they were able to escape with the win, no less. Arkansas looked like they were expected to be at the beginning of the year. Alex Collins looked very solid in the second half. The Arkansas line was getting the push like they should be. Their defense was playing all right, but I think Texas A&M should have pulled away a little bit earlier. I think that they should let either Kyler Murray, Kyle Allen, whoever they want to start, get more snaps, get a little bit more consistency going. Whenever it seemed like Kyle Allen was about to get in a groove or really needed a confidence boost, they would throw Kyler Murray in and just pretty much destroy it. I understand throwing Kyler Murray in for like a third and short situation where you want to run the ball. He's a lot faster than Kyle Allen, but I think you got to get a little bit more consistency going in that offense. I think A&M still definitely a contender in the SEC West. They were able to win a game that I think could have been a trap game for them. But they were able to stage off the upset and continue on. Got a big game against Mississippi State this weekend. If they can win that, then I think they have a chance of maybe getting inside the top 10, depending on how big a shakeup there is inside the top 10 this week. So move on to number 13. I've got Alabama. Alabama had a sizable win over Louisiana Monroe. Kind of got all their frustration out from the Ole Miss game the week before, but they go into a game that's huge this weekend. One of the biggest games left on their schedule for the season against Georgia, which kind of pins, I wouldn't say the best of the SEC West right now, obviously. I think that's Ole Miss. But for the time being, one of the best teams in the SEC West against, I think, the clear-cut favorite in the SEC East. Definitely a tough game in Athens for Alabama. But if they can win this game, then that shoots them right back into the college football playoff picture. And also gains a little bit of their respect back after the loss to Ole Miss. So definitely a big week for Alabama. If they can win this game, I think they'll be back inside the top 10, maybe inside the top 8. So move on to number 12. I've got Clemson. So Clemson has another team with a huge game this weekend against Notre Dame. Clemson obviously undefeated so far. They've had some closer calls than I think they would have liked to have. First real tough test they've had this season. Louisville was a little bit closer than they probably would have liked. But it'll be a big weekend for Deshaun Watson to either prove he's for real or to see if Clemson will really get knocked out of the college football playoff picture. I think it's going to be tough for a one-loss Clemson team to make the college football playoff, so it's a huge weekend for them. If they are able to beat Notre Dame, that firmly puts them in the playoff picture, firmly puts them as ACC title favorites. And right now, I think they're right where they're supposed to be. Them and Florida State are pretty much neck and neck for me as ACC title favorites right now. Pretty clear cut, too, after Georgia Tech lost this past weekend. So move on to number 11. I've got Florida State. So it should be a pretty easy week for Florida State. They are playing Wake Forest. I mean, obviously they need to avoid overlooking it completely because Florida State is the type of team this year that could lose a game like that. They've been letting teams hang around for a little bit too long. I think Everett Golson hasn't proved to be the most consistent quarterback over the last year or two, but I think that if he can even just hang on to the ball, prove to be a good game manager, then Dalvin Cook will be able to take over games enough. The defense will be able to handle it enough to where they could probably finish the year with only one loss on their record. So move on to number 10. I've got Utah. So Utah even had one vote for the number 1 overall spot this week. So Utah had as big a win as anyone. I'd say anyone this season. I don't know about that, but as big a win as anyone's had in the Pac-12 this season. Just an absolute whooping of Oregon at Autzen Stadium. Now, no, I don't know of anyone that saw this coming. I don't even know I don't remember seeing anyone pick Utah over Oregon. I know for sure that I thought Oregon had that game in the bag just because it was at Autzen. I didn't think that Utah would be able to hang on for as long as they have. But Utah's defense proven they're for real. Devontae Booker looked good. Travis Wilson looked good. This Utah team is definitely one of the 2 favorites to win the Pac-12. And if they can keep things going, maybe even beat a team like UCLA, USC, then you could be looking at a Utah team that's in the college football playoff picture. I think they're in the college football playoff picture right now as is. Inside the top 10, yeah. And it's a Pac-12 South that I'd say outside of USC, UCLA, and themselves, not as good as I thought the rest of the conference would be, or as good as the rest of the division would be. I thought the Arizona teams were going to be a lot better. So move on to number 9. I've got LSU. So LSU survived a scare against Syracuse. Fournette's proving to be everything and more for LSU, and he's averaging over 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns a game. He's just been an absolute animal so far, being everything he was hyped up to be as a recruit and more. The clear Heisman favorite right now, and for the time being, LSU I'd say is one of the 2-3 best teams in the SEC West. Firmly inside the top 10 for now. I don't think they really have a too tough a test coming up anytime soon. But I think that LSU needs to keep going, keep pushing, try to find a little bit more consistency at the quarterback position. The defense has been playing pretty well, but they have to get a little bit more out of Brandon Harris. Games against Alabama, games against Alabama, Ole Miss, and A&M might not be winnable games if they don't have good quarterback play. So I wouldn't even say good, even decent. So move on to number 8. I've got Georgia. So Nick Chubb rushed for something like his 12th straight 100-yard game against. Granted, it was against Southern, but there's nothing this season so far that hasn't proved to me that Georgia's not legit. Georgia looks legit every year at the beginning of the year. It seems like end up choking away at some point. Now, I don't know if losing to Alabama would really be called choking, just because Alabama is, a team that I think is still top 10 in talent, maybe even top 5 in talent. Still a top 15 team. Only loss they have is obviously to Ole Miss, who is now a top 3 team in the country. But if Georgia can win this week, then I think that'll vault them firmly into the playoff picture. I think they will. I don't know if they'll be in the top 4, but definitely top 6. Should be enough to get them over, I'd say, Notre Dame, UCLA, TCU. But it all depends on what else happens in the top 7 this week. So, big week for Georgia. Prove they're legit SEC, not just SEC East contenders, but SEC title contenders as well. So, move on to number 7. I've got TCU. So, TCU's just been ravaged defensively by injuries. Trevon Boykin, Aaron Green, Josh Doxson, they've been everything and more for that team. Been keeping the team afloat. That offense has been insane. Scoring, I think they scored more than 50 points in every game this year besides the Minnesota game. So for TCU, it's important this week to just get a big win against Texas, to get their feet under themselves at home, try to stay healthy, and keep on rolling for some of the bigger games in their conference schedule against West Virginia, OU, Baylor, and Oklahoma State, those type of games. So move on to number 6. I've got UCLA. So UCLA obviously had a huge win against Arizona. Josh Rosen proving that he might be the best freshman quarterback in the country. I wouldn't even say might. I think that's a pretty sure thing right now. Proving that he is a Heisman contender, and that overall just that UCLA team's been looking ridiculously good. The BYU game was a little bit too much of a scare, but it was just one bad game by Josh Rosen. The running backs look solid. So Jamabo, Paul Perkins both look ridiculously good. And like I said, the defense been good. They weren't slowed down at all by the by the loss of Miles Jack. I thought that was going to have a little bit more of an effect. It would be scary to think of how good they could be with Miles Jack right now, but for the time being, UCLA is the favorites out of the Pac-12, inserting themselves firmly into the college football playoff picture and putting themselves in a good position. So move on to number 5, we've got Notre Dame. So Notre Dame does have a big game this week against Clemson. Game day is going to be there. I do think that Notre Dame should be the favorites by a little bit. They played a little bit too close to UMass in the first half last week, but definitely pulled away at the end. I believe it was a 62-20 win. Deshaun Kaiser's been looking good. Will Fuller's been looking good as well. The entire Notre Dame offense hasn't missed a beat after the losses of Taron Folston and Malik Zaire. I think that Notre Dame is proving that they are one of the most talented teams in the country. Brian Kelly's got the ship righted. Definitely better than last year. If they can hang on, granted at this point last year they looked like they were right where they are right now. If they can hang on, if they can win big games like this Clemson game, then I think they will stay as favorites to be in the college football playoff. So move on to number 4. I've got Ole Miss. So Ole Miss definitely could be the second best or best team in the country, but for now, I think they're right where they should be. It's going to be hard for Ole Miss to stay undefeated in their conference schedule. I'll be honest, I don't think they can do it. Obviously, they are a very good team, but at the same time, this is Chad Kelly's first year at FBS play. They're playing in the toughest division in college football. And they did come away with a little bit of luck in the win against Alabama. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Ole Miss here, but they did play really close to Vanderbilt last week, probably the worst team in the SEC. So if I do see a little bit more out of Ole Miss, maybe just one more solid win, then I think that'll be enough for them to vault inside the top 3, maybe inside the top 2. Now, I think that Ole Miss made a little bit bigger jump in the rankings than they should have last week. I think the Alabama game against Georgia this coming weekend is also going to say a lot. Now, if Ole Miss can come away with a big win against Florida this weekend, then I'd be ready to say that they are a top 2 team. Now, moving on to number 3, I've got Baylor. So, again, I know that a lot of people are going to be confused about the selection of putting Baylor ahead of Ole Miss. Now, Baylor hasn't really proven any reason to me why they're not a top 3 team this year. Really haven't had a tough test yet. I think that this is their toughest test they've had so far this year, this coming weekend against Texas Tech. I think that game's going to prove a lot to see how good that defense actually is. I think the offense is going to be just as good as they've been the entire year, but until they start getting to the meat of their schedule against teams like TCU, Oklahoma State, OU, and West Virginia, then we'll see how good Baylor really is. But for the time being, with the drop-off of TCU with all those defensive injuries, I think that Baylor is the favorite out of the Big 12. I do think that the Big 12 will send a team to the playoff this year. Regardless if it is TCU or Baylor, one of the other teams like OU, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, I think that the Big 12 is a lot deeper than a lot of people thought it would be, just with the emergence of Texas Tech, the emergence of West Virginia, and if Kansas State can stay somewhat consistent, it'll show that the Big 12 does have a lot of depth. If Texas could have won that California game, that would have helped out the Big 12 a little bit, but as a whole, I don't think that affected it too much. But yeah, move on to number 2. I've got Michigan State. So the Michigan State win against Oregon obviously is a little bit dented now, but I think until Michigan State loses, they'll still be inside the top 3. I really think that their season's just going to be smooth sailing from here until the Ohio State game, as long as they're able to stay consistent until that point, and as long as both teams can prove in the games leading up to that point that they are both solid teams, that they can take care of business, not have any more scares against teams that are not top 50 teams inside the FBS. Then they both could, then one of them, whoever loses that game, even with one loss, could still be inside the college football playoff. So move on to number 1, obviously Ohio State. So the win against Western Michigan last week kind of proving that Ohio State's not as sluggish as a lot of people thought they were coming out of the season. Now, they didn't look great at the start of the season. They had a lot of close calls that shouldn't have been that close. But I think that was all rooted to the problems of the guys they were missing, the suspensions in the first game, and mainly the whole quarterback deal. So I think they found some consistency with Cardale Jones. I said for countless weeks that whoever they started quarterback, as long as they got their feet under them, as long as they were able to establish a rhythm, get maybe 1 or 2 solid wins under their belt, find some rhythm in the offense, then Ohio State will really start getting rolling, regardless if that was J.T. Barrett or Cardale Jones. It looks like it's going to be Cardale Jones. J.T. Barrett hasn't played very well when he's been given the chance. Obviously, my preseason Heisman prediction of J.T. Barrett's not looking good, but I do think that Cardale Jones is going to right the ship for them, and they'll be able to have a solid season. So, yeah, that's my top 25 rankings for the week. Should be another fun week in college football. Got a lot of big games this week. The Alabama-Georgia game is going to be huge. Clemson, Notre Dame, obviously. So, start of conference play for a lot of teams this weekend. So, yeah, looking forward to a fun week. And, yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.